Hi, welcome to the Shed. I'm Mr. H. This is the fourth day in our One-A-Day Musicianship Challenge. And today I'm going to break down the hundreds-year wall of standard notation. It's really important. As a professional musician, as an amateur musician, as an anything musician, you need to know how to read standard notation, but sometimes it can kind of get in the way. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So we've been talking about subdivision and beat, and this is just a regular rhythm written out in standard notation. And you need to know so many different things. And there's so many different levels of understanding in standard notation. Sometimes it gets in the way of understanding just the basic principles of beat and subdivision. So you might be a trained musician and know exactly what this sounds like. But for some people, there's so much like decoding that goes on, it kind of gets in the way. And even for me, if there's a really difficult rhythm that I haven't seen before, I have to like stare at it for a long time and then figure out what the subdivision is and where the attack, sustains, and releases are. And then, I understand it, and then I can perform it. But there is a way to make it easier. So let me show you that way. So this is Soundtrap, and anytime you create a drum machine, a drum track in Soundtrap, you get this in the bottom. So let me talk about this. This is a sequencer. So what a sequencer does is it shows you where the beats are and what the subdivision is. This is 16th note subdivision. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. Those spaces are the spaces in between the beats. So I can put my kick on beat 1 and let's play it. And you see what happens is we have this thing, it's called the clock. We have the MIDI clock, and what it's doing is it's going through the different subdivisions. The metronome is playing on the beats. That's where you would tap your feet. So let's put the kick where you would tap your feet. This is 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a. This makes sense, right? And now we remember that the snare was on beats 2 and 4, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, or the backbeat, and the hi-hat played all the subdivision, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a. That's great. And this isn't about how to make fire beats, even though that was pretty good. This is about how to use beat map notation or sequencer notation to understand rhythm better. Okay, so I'm going to add in a new track. To add in a new track, I'm going to just click Add in New Track, and then I can change the sound that I want. I'm going to put in just a random crash here. Now, the problem is I want to put it in a specific place. I'm going to put it right here. So this is 1 E and a, 2 E and a. This is the of 2. And it's really easy just to see 1 E and a, 2 E and a, that the attack is right there in time. You don't have to like do any decoding. It's right there in front of you. You just see that it's in that box and it's going to happen on that subdivision. So if I press play, nothing is going to be a surprise. I'm going to hear 1 E and a, 2 E and crash. Ready? 1. I'm just going to start from here. 2 E, crash. 1 E and a 2 E, crash. So let's get rid of all this stuff. Actually, we don't need to get rid of this stuff at all. Let's go to here. This is what I call beat map notation, and it's pretty much sequencer notation. So we have our little boxes here. We have the big lines that shows us where the numbers start. This is also the kind of notation that you see in a piano roll. And I think that every note has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then there are periods of musical time that don't have notes at all. So the beginning of a note is called an attack. We talked about that earlier. The middle of a note, when a note is being held, that is the sustain. When a note ends, that is the release. And when there's no note, that's a rest, right? That makes sense. So in here, I have a way that we can show an attack, a sustain, a release, and a rest. So an attack, I'm going to use an X since we're not using any pitch. It's just an X. Sustain is just a line. And then if there is a subdivision that doesn't have anything in it, that is a rest. When the line ends, that's a release. So this all makes sense. What we need to do is we need to practice doing some rhythms using beat map notation. So what I have here on this sheet, and this is actually going to be your assignment, there are 4 examples in 8th note subdivision, 3 examples in 8th note triplet, and then 4 examples in 16th note subdivision. So let's look at one of these examples. Let's look at number 4 for 8th note. Now I have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. That's our eighth note subdivision, which we've been practicing. The first attack is on the and of beat 1. The second is on beat 2. And then the last one is on the and of beat 4. My first step when I'm looking at a new rhythm, whether it's in standard notation or beat map, is trying to figure out how it works. So I'm looking for where the attack, sustains, releases, and rests are. Now, your job is you need to find something around you that has no sustain. So I'm going to use my hands. I'm just going to clap. You can use your hands too. But be creative. Find something around you that has no sustain, because in these examples, I don't have lines next to any of these. It's just the attack. So you need something with a nice crisp attack. I'm looking around me. I have like this, oh my goodness. So this lens cap has no attack. My Jake the Dog mug, when it's full of coffee, which is a problem because it's full of coffee and I'm not full of coffee. That's gross. That's a gross sound too. Oh, it still has no attack. That's good. So your job is to find something that has no attack. And then when you play these, you're going to, accurately read what's there because there's no sustain. So let's look at the examples again. This is our example. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So I have an attack on the and of 1, 2, and then an attack on the and of 4. So I would, you can practice using these metronomes. Whoa, I went backwards. With these metronomes, I have one at 60 and one at 90. I'm going to turn the one at 60 on. Oh, before we do any of this, we need to talk about your hands. I want you to repeat after me. My brain is smart. My hands are dumb. Let's do that again. My brain is smart. My hands are dumb. Yes, your brain is smart. And your hands are dumb. What this means is that if you go too fast for your brain to be in front of your fingers, your fingers and your hands are going to make the decisions, and they don't have any decision-making ability. They're just hands. So they're just going to clap. So I have 2 metronome settings here. If you go too fast at the beginning before you've mastered it, your hands are just going to start clapping, and it's going to be all over the place. So the first thing I do before I even turn on the metronome is I would count and play this out of time. That means that I can slow time down. You don't have to keep a steady beat for this step. So let's try that. I have 1 and 2. I'm just going to snap that works. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now I'm going to try that at a steady beat, but like super, super slow. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, a little faster. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now you need to pick 1 eighth note rhythm, 1 eighth note triplet rhythm, and 1 16th note rhythm, and you need to repeat it 4 times with the metronome. So I'm going to put my metronome on 60. There we go, the metronome's back. Count with it first, 1 and 2 and then play the rhythm. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. You need to do it 4 times in a row, and you need to do 1 eighth note, 1 eighth note triplet, and 1 16th note. Now, sorry, the first person I've talked to this morning. When you're counting along, you're acting as the MIDI clock. There is nothing that is helping you with the subdivision. The metronome is giving you the beat, but you have to supply the subdivision. Remember, the subdivision has to be super even. So let's look down here. For the eighth note triplet ones, just make sure you have 1 pull at, 2 pull at, 3 pull at, 4 pull at. And when I say it repeats, it goes right back to beat 1. You have to do that 4 times in a row. And then for the 16th note subdivision, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. And what I like to tell my students for 16th note and 8th note triplet is you want to put some separation in between the syllables, and that adds a little more punch to them. So 1 E and a 2 E and a. It just makes you a little more accurate. Okay, so you have to count and clap at least one of those examples from each subdivision level 4 times. And you remember, you can use whatever object you want as long as it doesn't have a lot of sustain. And I'm also going to put this on there too. This is just a little more of a fun metronome. This isn't our beat map reading examples. Here are beat map reading examples. So I'll do mine number 4 here. And, I'm going to make some camera cymbals. So I have 2 lens caps. And I'm going to do number 4. Remember, we have an attack on the and a 1, beat 2, and the and a 4. Here is my number 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and, oh my gosh, and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And who knew how difficult it was to play with camera cymbals? Definitely not me. Stop. I said stop. Okay. And if you want, you could use your instrument. You just need to make sure that you find a way where you can play with the least amount of sustain possible. And that's all about the articulation for a wind instrument. And then like for a stringed instrument, you have to stop the sound right away. And play this with the concert B flat if you want. So your teacher can assign whether you're going to play it on an instrument, whether you're going to clap it, or you're going to use a found object. So now teachers, this is how I would grade this. I would grade this with 3 categories. First category is steady beat. Are they with the metronome? Second category is subdivision. Are the subdivisions even? And it used to be where I would separate the subdivisions, 8th note, triplet, 16th note. Now I'm just going to have it all as kind of one catch-all category. And the third category is rhythmic accuracy. Are the attacks and rests in the correct slots? All right, so that is our day 4 challenge. Good luck, stay safe, wash your hands, and we'll see you in the shed.